morning, everyone. The public hearing on the committees and committees rules is now called to order. Pursuant to applicable law and my determination that attendance by remote means is necessary because an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent due to declared public health disaster caused by COVID-19. This meeting is being conducted by video conference. We'll now call the roll. I'll call the roll and then to establish quorum. Please mute yourself so that you can be acknowledged that you're here. Vice Chairman O'Shea. Vice Chairman Villegas.
Present.
Vice Chairman Napolitano. Alderman Laspada. Alderman Hopkins.
Present.
Alderman Dow.
Here.
Alderman King. Alderman Hairston.
Present.
Alderman Sawyer. Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Beal.
Yep.
Alderman Salarski Garza. Alderman Thompson.
Here.
Alderman Cardenas.
Present. Stop working.
Alderman Quinn.
Here.
Alderman Burke is here.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
Live from Brighton Park, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Alderman Coleman. Alderman Moore. Alderman Curtis.
Alderman Moore is present.
Okay. Alderman Moore is present. Alderman Curtis.
Present.
Alderwoman Taylor.
Here.
Alderman Brookins. Alderman Rodriguez.
Present.
Alderman Tabarez.
Present.
Alderman Scott. Alderman Cicho Lopez.
Present.
Alderman Maldonado.
Unmute. Okay. All right. So far, I think I got it. All right. Fine.
Okay. Alderman Burnett.
Present.
Alderman Irving.
Alderman Irving's present.
Alderman Talaferro.
Here.
Alderman Raboris. Alderman Cardona.
Here.
Okay. Alderman Wagaspack.
Present.
Alderman Rodriguez Sanchez.
Yes, Lou. And food.
Alderman Austin.
Here.
Alderman Ramirez Rosa.
Present.
Alderman Mitz.
Present.
Alderman Sposato.
Next Posato's here.
Alderman Nugent.
Present.
Alderman Vasquez.
Present.
Alderman Riley.
Present.
Alderman Smith.
Present.
Alderman Tunney.
Present.
Alderman Gardner. Alderman Kappelman.
Present.
Alderman Martin.
Present.
Alderman Osterman.
Present.
Alderman Haddon. Alderwoman
Present.
Haddon. And Alderman Silverstein.
Present.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, Alderman Sitowski Garza is here. I was not elevated to a panelist yet, but I'm here.
Okay, you're in. I have you.
Alderman Coleman is here. I also wasn't elevated to a panelist.
Okay, Alderman Coleman.
Same here, Chairman Harris, Alderman King.
Alderman King.
Alderman O'Shea is here. I have been elevated to a panelist, and I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who wishes to be recorded for the quorum call? We do have a quorum. There are 42 members present. At this time, we'll begin the public comment. Out of respect for everyone's time, each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. And our first speaker is Kate Ekman. Ackerman. Kate, can you pronounce your
Yes,
name?
ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, this is Kate Eakin, and I'm speaking on behalf of the McKinley Park Development Council.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to hear us. We at the McKinley Park Development Council are asking you to support the 12th Ward boundaries as shown in the Chicago Coalition Latino Caucus map published on December 1st. Like a lot of neighborhoods, it's really important to us to be in one ward. We have some very serious environmental justice concerns here, and several of the proposed maps, would separate our population from the central manufacturing district or split the CMD into two parts. That's a huge problem for basic things in our neighborhood, air quality, breathing. Because if that was to be split, we would lose influence over our major polluters, including Matt Asphalt on Pershing, which is currently operating without an IEPA permit. There are also maps out there that would split us from the actual McKinley Park, which is the crown jewel of our neighborhood. Green space is really important to us for all kinds of health and safety concerns, besides that, hey, people like green space. And we are concerned about that kind of policy as well. We have additional concerns about logistics facilities and industrial operations moving in on Ashland. Our current ward boundaries allowed Amazon to move in with no public comment at all because it was on the other side of the street. No housing in the 11th Ward is directly affected by these industrial operations on Ashland, but people who live in the 12th Ward who live here in McKinley Park are directly impacted in matters of pedestrian safety, pollution, heavy traffic, and everything that goes with that. All of Ashland in McKinley Park is designated for ETOD, and we are actively engaged with a number of programs to bring in the kind of development that the community wants. Those efforts would be far more difficult if residents are not in the same ward as the TOD zone. We have additional TOD zones on Archer Western that we are up, and Pershing that we are concerned about as well. We worked with CMAP for several years to produce our official CMAP endorsed neighborhood plan, and realizing the elements of this plan, including the environmental justice issues, as well as walkability and affordable housing, are going to be significantly more difficult if our neighborhood is split up. One thing in particular I want to point out is that the committee's current proposed map splits 35th Street, our main commercial area, north and south. We want to redevelop 35th Street into a vibrant, walkable Main Street experience. And if one side of the street is in the 11th and one side of the street is in the 12th, that is going to be significantly harder and would really hamper our efforts towards economic development, as well as increasing walkability in the neighborhood. Finally, as a neighborhood with a growing Asian population, we support the creation of a majority Asian ward, and we know that this can be done without splitting our neighborhood. There has been a false dichotomy set up that in order to get a majority Asian ward, McKinley Park has to be broken apart, and it's simply not true. For all of these reasons, we're asking you to support.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dolores Saeed.
Thank you, aldermen and alderwomen of Chicago. We're all here because redistricting matters to us, our vote matters, and voice matters to us and our communities. I'm a Chicago kid. My parents immigrated from India, and I grew up learning to play softball and double dutch. Along with eating kebabs at home, I learned to love kolaskis, chilaquiles, and cheesy grits. That's Chicago. But in different neighborhoods, certainly we are segregated. We're the third largest city in the nation, and yet we have zero representation in our city council from the Chinese or any East Asian communities, zero from South Asian ethnic backgrounds, no Indians, no Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, etc., zero from any Middle Eastern or any North African communities. I could go on. And this isn't because we don't have these communities in Chicago. In fact, Chicago's home to, some of the largest of these communities in the nation. But there's little representation and almost little voice. I'm currently the president of the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, and we work very closely with diverse races, faiths, and backgrounds, including AAAJ, Change Illinois, Rainbow Push, Latino Policy Forum, and others. Many of you have already been strong partners with us, and for that I thank you. And we have two asks today. One, please make Chinatown and neighboring areas a majority Asian ward. It is a vibrant, growing Chinatown. It's influencing the areas around it, and it is high time we had a specific Asian award. Number two, the Westridge area needs to be consolidated. This is the second largest Asian population in Chicagoland. It is a large South Asian community in the city. It contains refugee and new American communities that weren't even here 10 years ago, Rohingya and others. They need easy access to resources, aid organizations, schools, and to you to help them become the strong Chicagoans we need. This area also contains several ethnicities.
Hi, Travis, it's Dad. I'm
live-
checking in to see what your plans are for the weekend. Give me a call when you get a chance. It's about,
Alderman Burke, can you mute your mic, please? I apologize. Please go ahead, speaker. Delora, please unmute.
Okay, am I unmuted now? Yes.
Yes,
great.
you are.
As I've said, this area in Westridge contains new American communities, refugee communities that weren't even here 10 years ago. And they absolutely need one access point to resources, aid organizations, and to you, our city leadership. Westridge also contains several ethnicities that live, work, play, pray in this one area. So you've got to ensure that this complex communities, parents and schools and community centers are in the same ward as their homes, because navigating this space is challenging. We have submitted maps that show specific streets and areas. We're working with several different organizations, and we're asking for Westridge to be in one consolidated space. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shavana Berman.
Chairman, speaker 3 is not present.
Okay, is Shabana Berman, Berman available? No?
She is speaker 4.
Okay, speaker 4.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning, Chairperson Harris and members of the committee. My name is Shobana Verma, and I'm a Chicago resident. Having lived here for over 15 years and worked closely with the South Asian American community as the Executive Director of the South Asian American Policy and Research Institute, SAPRI, I would like to share that redistricting is an important issue for Asian Americans who, unfortunately, are often missing from the narrative. The Asian American population in Illinois has grown significantly in the past 30 years, and census data indicates today we are the fastest growing population both in Illinois as well as nationally. Asian Americans make up 5.7% of Illinois' population, and the South Asian American community remains the largest subgroup based on ACS data. I stand here today. I am glad for the opportunity to speak with the committee members on behalf of SAPRI and several other community service providers, such as the Indo-American Center, Muslim Women Resource Center, and civic advocates, as well as Asian American community members from the Westridge neighborhood located in the north side of Chicago. We are a diverse community and comprise a community of interest based on our common social, economic, and representation interests. Our community members share similar income levels, educational backgrounds, housing patterns, and other common issues of concern. We have multi-generational families dealing with language barriers, immigration, citizenship, and refugee issues, affordable housing, access to healthcare, education, and are often targets of crime motivated by bias against our race, gender, color, religion, or national origin. However, while our ward boundaries should reflect our communities to be able to realize our electoral power, our communities remain split between the 40th and 50th wards, rather than keeping us together and empowering us to be able to find a voice in City Hall. Over the years, the South Asian American community has grown around Devon, and it will continue to do so over the next decade. We believe our community is bounded by Albion Avenue to the north, Ardmore Avenue to the south, Damon Avenue to the east, and Sacramento Avenue to the west. We need providers, advocates, schools, businesses, and faith centers together, so family needs are taken care of across one ward and not divided into multiple wards, making it difficult to address specific new issues along with daily struggles. This would also bolster the Westridge Asian American community's influence and further help our community grow and prosper. We urge the City Council to unify our Westridge Asian American community in one ward, which would allow one alderperson to address the unique issues facing our community members, as opposed to only part of that community. Along with consolidation for Westridge, we stand as allies.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dennis Monboro.
Hi, Chairperson Harris. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. I'm Dennis Mondero, a resident of Chicago, born in the Philippines and raised as an immigrant kid in Uptown. Thank you, Chairperson Harris and distinguished members of the Rules Committee. I work as the Executive Director of Chinese Mutual Aid Association, a nonprofit organization in Uptown that serves the immigrant community there. I'm here to testify in support of the map drawn by Chairperson Harris and the subcommittee members of the Rural Committee. I appreciate the enormous challenge that your members have in coming up with a fair map that can best provide representation to all our communities. With that said, I'm personally appreciative that that map promulgated by your committee includes something historic, which my colleagues Delara and Shobana have just mentioned, which is the first ever majority Asian American ward in Chinatown. Thank you so much for finally drawing up an Asian American majority ward, and I urge the committee to vote on a final map and the full City Council to vote on a final map that includes such. I'm also appreciative that the map promulgated by the Rules Committee keeps much of the Argyle area of immigrant residents and businesses in the 48th Ward, as Alderman Harry Osterman is a dynamic leader who truly cares about the AAPI immigrant community. I have on countless times walked the Argyle and Broadway area with Alderman Osterman, visiting business owners and residents as he listens to the immigrant community's concerns about crime, education, and jobs. Alderman Osterman has been a dynamic leader, and he shares our immigrant community's passion to find meaningful ways to keep the Asian immigrant community living and working in Uptown for years to come. Again, thank you so much to all members of the Rules Committee.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mangel Batista. Gil Batista.
Chairman, they're not present.
Okay. Our next speaker is Joanne Hitton.
Chairman, they're not present either.
Okay. Our next speaker is Michael Woods.
Chairman, they're also not present.
Oh, wow. Ernest Wong.
Please press *6 to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair Harris and members of the Rules Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this morning about the redistricting efforts and the need for a majority Asian American ward in Chicago. My name is Ernie Wong. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, born on the South Side, born and raised in the South Side of Chicago. I'm also an urban designer and a landscape architect that has been completing projects throughout the city for over 30 years in all 50 wards. I've had the honor and privilege to work on projects in Chicago's Asian communities, including Pingtown Memorial Park and the Wells Wentworth Connector in Chinatown, Palmisano Park, formerly Stearns Quarry, and the Bubbly Creek Framework Plan in Bridgeport, several playgrounds in McKinley Park, the Argyle Streetscape in Uptown, and currently working in West Ridge. This work has allowed me to watch the growth of Chicago's Asian communities throughout the years and serve on the boards of the Chinese American Service League and the Chinatown Chamber of Commerce. Chicago's Chinatown is the fastest growing Chinatown in the United States. There is a need for a majority Asian American ward for the city of Chicago. Over the past few months, you've heard the arguments for this designation, and I won't rehash those opinions. The media, however, likes to portray divisions in our community revolving around crime, violence, and safety. I assure you, there are no divisions in this community, but rather discussions that are being hashed out. These are the same discussions that every community in the city is having about these tragic issues. What I'd like to talk to you about is the absence of Asian American representation at City Council. As you know, Amaya Pawar was the first Asian American elected to City Council in Chicago's 200-plus year history. As his 47th ward was and is primarily a white North Side community, the Asian populations throughout the city have been represented by either Caucasian or Latino aldermen. When the majority Asian communities, i.e. Chinatown, Bridgeport, McKinley Park, are divided in the representation, there is little to no opportunity for their representation to look like or truly understand the cultural nuances of that specific community. When I look across the country and see the divisiveness wreaking chaos on our democracy, I also see other cities and urban areas having truly diverse representation in their city governments. Setting aside the major cities in California and New York, I continue to see Asian representation in cities like Houston, Las Vegas, and even Atlanta. Boston's new mayor is Asian. These are all smaller cities than Chicago, which has me wondering just how progressive is our city. Establishing a majority Asian American ward is a start towards true representation of our city, but it also reflects the diversity of this great city of Chicago. It represents the wholeness of the city to embrace each other and recognize that we're all different. This is a mission of respect and to honor ourselves and our diversity. I request and urge that the Rules Committee do the right thing and draw a ward map that includes a majority Asian American ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Lowe.
Good morning, Chair Harris.
Good morning. Thank you.
Members of the committee. My name is Rich Lowe, and I grew up in Chicago's Chinatown. I'm also an artist that worked on various projects in Chinatown with different community groups. I have firsthand knowledge of how the Chinatown residents and groups have worked together to build a strong and resilient community. We had an historic opportunity to have a ward with at least 50% Asian Americans in both the proposed Rules Committee map and the proposed Chicago Coalition map. As the committee continued to discuss the details of changes each member would like to see in the boundary of his or her ward, I urge you to hold firm to this commitment. I don't want to see our voices get lost in the mix. As a longtime resident of Chinatown, I have seen Asian American community population grow over the years. According to the 2020 census, it has grown from 6,000 to over 30,000 in Chinatown and the surrounding areas in the past 5 decades. The media often touts it is the only growing Chinatown in North America. Much of this growth in numbers, as well as the strength, is because of the local organizations that have been taking the responsibility to lead. Asian Americans are seldom seen and heard in the news, at public events and meetings. I remember growing up that Chinatown did not get the resources needed. By passing a map that includes an Asian American majority ward, you will be recognizing that our voice and our representation is important. I thank you for your time hearing my testimony.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Simon Shah Shui? Simon, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Hi, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Simon Siu. I'm an immigrant from Hong Kong and have lived in the Bridgeport since 1980. I'm an American education. I have a master's degree at DePaul University in computer science. I did not come here to talk about myself. I'm come here to plead to my case to keep Commonwealth in the 11th ward. I fully support 11th Ward Alderman Thompson's map. I love my neighborhood and my neighbor, and we take care of each other. We water each other's grass if we have time, and then we shovel each other's snow. It is a little thing to make it a so tight, so good neighborhood. It makes no sense to break us into pieces. We work close and well with the Alderman Thompson for a betterment and value our neighborhood. The alderman show up just like Christmas, show at Healy and Chinese New Year lunches, and then he participate in Chinese New Year parade, and always willing to support us in our neighborhood within his ward. Remove Commonwealth is not the best solution for this community that have been a part of the 11th Ward since 1970. Where you may not see it, that we are a mixed group, different culture, response, and make up with the good neighborhood. I live in the Bridgeport, but I have a lot of friends who live in the Commonwealth. Okay, and then I don't think of this as a separate places. I think it belongs to 11th Ward neighborhood. I don't feel our neighborhood or any neighborhood should be break apart for a shaking of a number or statistic. I hope that you hear us, hear our voice regarding on that issue, the people who live in 11th Ward. We may be a neighborhood or our large neighborhood is in the 11th Ward, and we never operate as a separate solution, and the pace is much more tighter, much more solid line on a map drawn by the people who are trying to tell us what we belongs to. Thank you for listening. I fully support Alderman Thompson's map. Thank you. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you. I think that concludes our speaking portion of this for the committee. The committee's also received email written comments which have been shared with committee members. For the record, I'd like to acknowledge that Alderman Scott, Vice Chairman Napolitano is here. Alderman Mitz is here.
Maldonado.
Alderman Maldonado is here.
Gardner.
Yes.
Alderman Gardner. Alderman Sawyer.
Rodriguez Sanchez is here too. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Alderman Rodriguez Sanchez is here. And is Alderman Mitchell here? Alderman Brookins? Alderman Raboris? Okay, so that is our acknowledgement for our members present. Could you please mute your mics, please?
Yeah, Chairman
Alderman Burnett is here.
Alderman Burnett, you are here.
Chairman Alderman Lopez is back.
Okay, and Alderman Mitchell is here, is present. All right, thank you. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our 12th hearing on the city's remap process. I have truly appreciated everyone who's taken the time to weigh in on the maps and give their input from the community, residents. It's been very enlightening to hear all their wonderful comments. The public feedback is vital to this process, and I think Chicago residents have provided us with their comments so far. Through our online mapping tool and written comments during our many public hearings and community meetings, we received hundreds of comments that was sent to all my colleagues. So thank you for your engagement in this process. We'll continue to welcome public input after today. We'll also continue to take written comment and the free online interactive mapping tool remains open to the public. We will continue to welcome public input. I'll say that twice. We will continue to welcome public input. I'd like to remind all my colleagues that the map room is open on the second floor in City Hall. So please feel welcome to get in there with your neighbors and work on your maps. In addition, I've made posters of each of the 3 maps available to every alderman. They can be picked up in the Rules Committee office. And again, thank you to Alderman Vasquez for the great idea. Today, also provided our committee with more information on the federal decision that came down over the holidays in the Illinois legislators. The decision is central to ensuring our map plan is upheld in court and avoiding expense and time of litigation in court. Understanding the case and its implications for our map will always help bring members of the Latino caucus to the map room so we can avoid a costly and lengthy referendum. Many of the merits have been discussed, but we haven't yet had a chance as a committee to dig into the details. It's important that we do that before we take any further steps. As chair of this process, I will exhaust every resource I can to try to get us all to come to agreement on a map, which means helping my colleagues understand the path that could be before all of us. Today, I've asked Mike Casper, who successfully argued the Illinois legislative redistricting case, as well as many others, and American University professor and historian Alan Lichtman, to provide a presentation on the recent federal case. Professor Lichtman has been an expert witness in over 100 civil and voting rights cases and is the authority on redistricting cases. He's published 11 books and hundreds of public, popular and scholarly articles. He's lectured in the U.S. and international and provided commentary for major U.S. and foreign networks and leading newspapers and magazines across the world. Professor Lichtman's predicts a system, the key to the White House, that correctly predicts the outcome of the U.S. presidential election since 1984, which I think is so amazing. Professor Lichtman has testified for countless elected bodies across the country on topics of redistricting, and I applaud him for taking time out of his busy schedule to address the Rules Committee today. I've reached out to the members of the Latino caucus to ensure that they could offer speakers to present on the redistricting case as well. With that, we'll take our first public speaker. Would you like to take the floor, Bert Oldison or Homero Tristan? Who wants to go first?
Madam Chairperson, I would yield to the professor and Mr. Casper and like to make comments after their presentation, if we could.
I'd like for you to go first. So if you could go first. Alderman Villegas.
Madam Chair, thank you. My understanding, the discussion from your office to the coalition map members was that there would be a presentation, and then our council would have the ability to listen to the presentation first, and then have the opportunity to rebut whatever is there, whatever relevant.
I respectfully disagree. I asked you to send me your speakers for today, and that was the extent of the dialogue.
Well, we have our Micaela, who was in charge of speaking with Michelle in your office.
And we simply asked, if you go back and look at the email we sent you, We simply ask for correspondence, and that's it, for you to come and speak.
So, no problem, Madam Chair. Then I will talk to, have Bert and Homero discuss, I guess, their position, and then I would just allow for the ability to have Bert or Homero be able to come back on if they hear something that they may have missed from the presentation.
If that'll be the will of the body, if anyone has questions of them after they present.
Thank you.
Okay, and Alderman Tabarez has a question.
Madam Chair, my understanding is that your office told Micaela from our staff directly that we would not be discussing the state case at today's hearing.
Oh, definitely not, Alderman, definitely not. Then we directly, and Michelle's direct comment was that we will be discussing redistricting. And that includes all of that. So I apologize if Micaela gave you other information, but absolutely not.
Well, I did not see this in the agenda.
Well, it's about redistricting, and as the chairman, I reserve the right to have people come and speak on the issues at hand. Okay, Alderman Irving. Alderman Irving?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like for us to, if we could, move forward. If the speakers that you indicated that do not want to present, then if they don't want to present, then they don't want to present, then forfeit that, and then we can move forward if that's their desire. And also, I don't think we've ever had a situation where speakers are questioning other speakers here. Generally, that conversation comes from the members.
Exactly.
So my, thought would be that if the people are not ready or don't want to speak, then we move on and they forfeit that, and we can continue to move this ball forward. Thank you.
Okay. So are either of your speakers going to speak? So Bert Olson, are you speaking next?
Yes, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, because it's hard to respond to a presentation that we haven't heard yet. I'll have to respond to what we read in the newspaper as to what Professor Lichtman is going to say. I think I know what Mike's going to say based on the case. And on behalf of the Coalition Latino Caucus, just a couple of points. Number one, it's been the Latino and I believe the African American Caucus's position, as well as the Rules Committee position, that 50% is the number, not the 40% that I read in the paper today, that I think the Honorable Professor Lichtman is going to talk about. Number two, the state case had to do with the Democrat and the Republican parties, not with a nonpartisan election like we have in Chicago. Number three, the comments, again, that I've read in the paper, and I'm sure Mr. Casper will talk about, talks about comparisons in the Joe Barrios race, the Alvarez race, et cetera, which were the wrong comparisons. And I'm not going to talk about the legal maneuvering in the state case since I was not part of it, so it wouldn't be proper for me to opine as to what either side's strategy is. But the strategy we have, and what I consider as the law, is that we look at judicial and other down ballot races to really find a determination as to how to comprise these wards to make it fair based on the population and based on the census. It really is not a fair comparison or a legal comparison. And I quite frankly, Madam Chair, I hope we never have to go to a legal case. And if we do have to go to referendum, we go to referendum. But it's our hope too, from the Latino and Coalition MAPS proponent standpoint that we do reach some type of compromise with the city council, with all or most of the members agreeing to a map that truly represents the census. And in honor of the voting blocks that we have put together in the coalition map. So it is not our intent as the Coalition Latino Caucus to threaten or propose litigation. It's our recommendation, as well as that I've heard yours, that we sit down and try to reach a workable compromise, respecting the data and respecting the population and respecting the increase in the Latino population, and respecting, as we heard speakers today, in the Asian population. We think we've done that in our proposed map, which has been on file since early December, and which is the only map that has been filed for referendum. That should not hold us back. I would like comments later after the professor speaks and after Mr. Casper speaks, but again, you're correct, Madam Chair. It's the Rules Committee will have to determine that. Thank you.
Does that conclude your remarks?
Just one other thing, and again, with all due respect to the professor, and I do value his comments and his published books and his lectures, but with all due respect, and I think the alderman will understand this, if you haven't walked a precinct in Chicago, then your opinion is a theoretical opinion based on numbers from elsewhere and not from the city of Chicago. We are unique. We are Chicago, and I think it bears to say that we should look at our numbers. And for those of us who have lived in Chicago, have worked in Chicago, and for you folks who represent Chicago, you need to respect our traditions and the census data in Chicago. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amiro?
Yes, good morning.
Tristan, please go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Am I able to proceed? Good morning, members of the committee. It is our position with the Chicago Coalition map that the allotment of 15 minority Latino districts is lawful under any analysis, including including the three-part jingles test. And in our view, I believe that the three-part jingles test must be applied on a district-by-district basis. Much has been talked about with issue in relation to citizen voting age population, and I think that this committee itself has rejected the notion that that is the standard. But I think one thing is clear, that even under citizen voting age population, 15 Latino districts would be sustainable. Now, I'm not sure what the professor will be presenting today, and I know that he has studied the maps and the data related to the state case. I'm not certain to what extent he's been able to do the analysis on the city population in the city map. But one thing is clear, that I am certain that the professor would not be able to opine that for certain a challenge to 15 Latino districts would be sustained. In fact, I think that if Latinos are able to, in the coalition map, obtains 15 majority Latino districts, that map would be conclusively legal, and any challenges to it would be likely unsuccessful. The Chicago Latino Caucus map provides for the 15 districts having the majority under the CVAT measure, and individual analysis of the wards as proposed by the Chicago Latino Caucus map show that those districts are possible. The map also provides for 16 Black majority districts, which is the same amount that's really being proposed by their map if you take into account one of their districts being at below 50%. The Latino Caucus map also proposes an Asian ward. So the 15 Latino districts do not disenfranchise another protected minority group. And so I think that's important. And again, one of the reasons that I posit that in the event of a challenge to a map that does conclude with 15 Latino districts, that particular map would be deemed to be legal. Now, in the state case, I know that there was use of the American Community Survey data, which was later found to be data that was not reliable, and it was based on smaller sample sizes. And the legality of the use of that data, I think, should be called into question. Here, I think we have something different where we have census numbers and we're relying on census numbers in order to make our case. The Constitution provides that the allotment of representatives should be based on the decennial census data. That much is clear, and I think the state case ignores that to a large extent. So it is not, in essence, the total population is a standard measure used for the U.S. representative distribution, as well as most state representative elections. And that was something that was underscored in Evanwall versus Abbott, the 2016 case, Professor, which I'm sure that you're familiar. And the state, I think, sees the benefit of non-citizen population for allotment of representatives to the U.S. House. Virtual representation maintains the strength and inclusivity of communities of interest. Although non-citizens are unable to vote, they are still active members of our communities, providing expertise to our workforce, mentorship to our youth, and economic growth to small businesses. So I think that any rejection of participation by that and those contributions really is suspect, and I think disenfranchises those particular communities. So total population, in my view, I think that in viewing the numbers, especially in Chicago, again, not knowing what the professor will say, I can assure you that the 15 Latino majority districts that have been drawn by the coalition map would be a map that would be sustained if ever challenged in court. I believe that 15 Latino districts is fair and takes into account all residents and all citizens of the city. And I believe that the map as put forth by the Latino caucus does in fact posit and allow for the African American community to have fair representation with 16. And in fact, the Latino caucus has made overtures and continues to be willing to compromise. It's just a matter of having a set of fairness, having a set of rules that would allow us to actually participate, not only to go into the map room to be told that you can only pick from what has not already been selected. And I believe that if there's an open process that would allow us to actually participate in the drawing of the maps, not just be able to go to the map room, I think that we would be able to compromise. And I think that all of Chicago deserves the ability to avoid a costly referendum. And I think the coalition map members have already stated that they are willing, able, and are prepared to roll up our sleeves and to work with all members of the city council. So that'll conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. And as chairman of this committee, I'm totally happy to hear that you're willing to get in that room and roll up your sleeves. Alderman Leslie Hairston.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question for Mr. Tristan. When the Latino caucus, when you all were drawing the map, did you work with the aldermen in the wards that you drew?
The process by which we undertook—
That is not the question. Please answer the question.
Would you please restate the question?
The question was, when you were drawing the map, the Latino map, did you work with the aldermen in the wards of the maps that you drew?
So I think when we drew when you say when we drew the map, when we attended the map room, we worked with—
That's not what I asked.
We met
you submitted a map, and you submitted a map with all the wards, right?
That's correct, Alderman.
Okay, and so did you work with those aldermen in the wards of the maps that you drew?
Yes, Alderman.
Be careful how you answer.
No, understood. We worked with and met with over 35 aldermen to come up with our map, and we reached out to all 50 members of the body. So only about 30 or 35 of the members actually attended and worked with us on drawing that map.
Did you work with me?
Alderman, I don't believe that you agreed to work with us. No.
I didn't disagree. I was never asked.
I'm not privy to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman. As a follow-up to my colleague's question, I guess the same would and could be asked of the Rules Committee if all aldermen were allowed to participate in that map as well. Because I know from my own experience that I was basically told what my map was going to be and not asked what I wanted. So I'd like to know, with that map being filed, were we all allowed to have an honest and open participatory process in the map that the Rules Committee filed as well?
And I will say this on the record, off the record, and to everyone, anybody who wanted to be a part of this process could have been. How you participated and how you went in a room and worked with your neighbor and alderman was on you, not on me. The process was open and available to all 50 aldermen and the entire all 50. And for people who have never done a mapping process, the people that get in and start working on their maps and working with a group of people, when you come in after them, the process is so much more difficult. Because when you're sitting in a space negotiating with your colleagues, it's a give and take that happens in that process. It is a give and take that happens in that process. And Alderman Lopez, I was there when you were ushered out of my space and out of my office and didn't go into the space and then work with your neighbor and alderman who were in that map room. So everyone was given that chance to do that. Now, whether you actually went in and did it is on you, not on the Rules Committee. Every 50 aldermen, I asked all of you on the public record, each and every time I've done this, to go in a room and meet. So you now have my response to that all.
Respectfully, Chairman, that is not correct. That is not even factually correct.
Okay.
Because I was in, Chairman, if I may, I was in that map room from the very beginning when there was no, I answered your call to come in. I worked with Mr. Casper.
Point of information, Madam Chair.
Go
Are we
ahead,
supposed
Alderman
to be
Harrison.
asking questions of the presenter?
It looks like I'm going to get answered questions about my process. So, but
I
should
asked
be
that we
answering
speak
questions.
to Mr. Tristan, who has appeared before us, and we're grateful for his time.
Okay. So go ahead, Alderman Lopez. Finish your statement.
Thank you. So the question was everyone allowed to create and contribute to the map that was presented by the Rules Committee? The question that I'm asking, Chairman, is that as someone who is and was not affiliated with either caucus at the very start of this process, I did go to the map room. I did go when you asked me, all members, to go at the very beginning. And I did present an initial map and went 3 or 4 subsequent times to be with either neighbors or to see what kind of negotiations were happening. And yet the map that was presented by the Rules Committee is a map that I in no way participated in. So I think if we're asking if one side or the other allowed for everyone to participate, that question should be posed to both groups, because the answer.
Point of privilege, Madam Chair. Point of privilege, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Alderman Harrison.
It is very disrespectful.
I asked my question to the speaker, and I got a response from the speaker. It was for the speaker.
And I'm going to say go ahead, Alderman Lopez. After you finish your comment, I'll say asked and answered. So go ahead and finish.
I'm trying to ask the same question to the
asked
and
answered.
And I
Alderman Lopez.
But I do not appreciate the lack of respect for trying to get answers to a question when I'm being accused of not participating or being called a novice. I think it's well within my right to have clarification as a member of this body when I was operating initially by the rules you set forward. And I don't appreciate anyone trying to contradict or take away my ability to ask that question. Thank you.
And thank you, Alderman. Asked and answered. Alderman Spasato, followed by Alderman Irving.
Madam Chair, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
If Alderman Scott, you feel free, Madam Chair, sounds like he has a point of clarification.
Scott hand was up. Yeah, so if I'm allowed.
Go ahead, Alderman. Go ahead, Alderman Scott.
I would caution my colleagues about admonishing the chair. This is her committee, and if she answers the question, I take offense to admonishment of the chair. This is her committee. She runs the committee as she feels. And what I will say is, my colleagues to the south and to the west of me, although Rodriguez did not come in the room, we had discussions on what our map should be, and I drew my map in respect to him. I also had a conversation with Alderman Cardenas in the 12th ward, which is a bordering ward. He came in the room with me, and we drew our map. The point being is, you can't come in yourself and draw your map in an isolated, drawing your map and thinking that is going to stand. You have to work with your colleagues. And I think that is what the chairman is saying. If you come in the room with your colleagues, not by yourself, and draw your map for yourself, then work can get done. So again, I would ask that the body not admonish the chair, but work with the chair and ask questions of the chair and not admonish her, because this is her committee and she can run it as she chooses. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Spasato.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to add something also. So I want to bring everybody back to 2011/2012 with the last remap. And I want to remind everybody what happened to me. I believe there's about 25 people left from the last map. And the map process was what happened to me last time. And of course, Fioretti and Tony Folks, that I got a phone call one day and I was told that I was mapped out of my ward. And then of course I went on a profanity-laced tirade, and I was told by then Alderman Mel, Rules Committee Chair Mel, that, oh, we were able to keep you in your ward. Well, at that time, I had no say, nothing. My ward was basically 25, maybe 80% left of what my original ward was. I had no say. I had no chance to defend myself other than hoping, praying, begging people not to support the map. That was my only hope. The vote was 41-9. Certainly there's 20 of you left that voted against me, voted to destroy me, as I say, but it's done, it's over with. Never had a chance, never had to be any part of any process. Madam Chair, you and me don't always agree on things, but I believe you 100% respect me, and I believe you understand that I 100% respect you. I can't believe how fair you tried to make the process, how many opportunities you gave people to work together. My colleagues that I tried to work with, there's stuff they have that I would want, there's stuff I have they would want. We continue to try to work things out. Is my map the map that I would pick if I could draw my own map with no say from anybody else? Absolutely not. But is it acceptable? Is it fair? Yes, I believe so. We had a chance to sit down. And when talking about asking people to come into the map room, I haven't been keeping count, Madam Chair, but I got to believe you're pretty damn close to 100 times saying that, coming into the room, let's try to work things out. So I commend you. I thank you for the fairness from what I've seen. And like I say, it's not going to be perfect for everybody, but I believe it's been a pretty fair process. And if people come and try to work together, I think this will all be worked out. And with that, it's important to me to bring up what happened 10 years ago. I know it's history. I'm still a bit bitter. I've forgiven, but I didn't forget what happened to me. So just want to remind everybody, 75 to 80% of my ward was taken away from me, a totally different ward that I knew nothing about. But I'm here, I'm still standing, and this process is, there's no such thing as 1,000%, but it's 1,000% more fair than what happened 10 years ago. And for that, I thank you, Madam Chair, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Alderman Hairston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have another question for Mr. Tristan. It is your assertion that there should be 15 Latino wards, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and in any of the negotiations, have you stated that there must be a guarantee of 15 wards in order for you all to negotiate?
I don't believe that that's ever been the position that in order to negotiate, I believe that we just wanted fairness.
Have
and
you refused
ability.
to negotiate without a guarantee of 15 wards?
I don't think that would be accurate. I think
I think that
actually
would be accurate.
negotiated.
I've been in the room with you.
Yes, and respectfully, I
All
don't
right,
think
thank
that
you.
was, I don't believe that was a position. And, you know, I can state with respect to the question and the issue of whether Latinos were part of the MAP or attended the MAP room. They did, and I attended at least a dozen of those sessions with them as counsel. And I can state that in many instances when they did seek to draw maps, a lot of times there was just a lot of unknowns, and there was a lot of statements with respect to doing that would cause disruption to surrounding folks who've already been here and already mapped. So I think I can state that we have worked with the Rules Committee. We have gone to the MAP room. And simply going to the MAP room in and of itself does not conclude a fair process. And that's all we've been asking for, is a fair process. Thank you.
Alderman Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I've heard my colleagues talking, as you know, my position. We've heard a lot of testimony. A lot of people have different perspectives. I have tried to work with my neighbors, and I appreciate it's not my neighbors that I had a concern with, but you know, my neighbors to the west and to the east, we worked out a map. Unfortunately, that wasn't what was presented. You know, and this is historic. It's the first time ever that we're uniting Chinatown, and that was a part of the map that I presented, and part of the map that I worked with Alderman Dowell and Alderman Cardenas. And you know, you heard people, everyone testifies about how vibrant and the growth of Chinatown, and that's something I've worked on since I've come into this office. Yes, I'm not Asian, but you know, the listening to the concerns of the business owners, the residents, everyone to make that a vibrant commercial district, we've been successful. It was, you know, two different aldermen from the 25th ward that I've worked with, and so we do appreciate you allowing our neighbors, my neighbors, to sit down and talk. I just, you know, would respectfully request that people listen to what, you know, we are talking about and listening to what we're requesting as well. So I'd ask that of the body. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Cardenas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I echo the sentiments of Alderman Thompson, and I'm speaking on the same issue. I think him and I went into the MAP room thinking the process would yield that him and I would, what the results that we wanted would yield the outcome. That was not the case, and I just urge you to speak with the mappers to allow us to, him and I, to map the ward, the maps that we, the wards that we want, and not on the McKinley Park and Bridgeport boundaries, so we can get a fair conclusion between that. I think your process, I respect your process. I just think that the members have something else in mind than what we had in mind, and we disagree. And I just like, you know, for the record, I like to keep McKinley Park intact, and I think it would help everybody on both the 11th ward and the 12th ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. I welcome you to come back into the MAP room and work with your neighbors. And our final question before we go to our next speaker is Alderman Jason Irvine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want us to take the perspective that this has to be greater than I and me. Everything, and a lot even from public comment, from everything, has been about I and me. If we don't have what I consider to be an open process where we're listening, or the law is not moving to make changes, Black folks will still be in the same 6 wards that we were in back in the 50s and 60s. The Latino community would be in the same one ward it had back in the 70s. So I think we need to think a little broader than just I and me in this process. We have changing demographics. We understand that, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we're looking at everyone, especially those that may not necessarily have a seat at the table. I think that the more we think about this holistically, the better it will be for our citizens and for the city. And so I'm hopeful that we can get out of the I and me syndrome and look at the us and we as a city, because unfortunately, I think there's some things that have transpired in this process that may take years to repair. I'm hopeful that we can find common ground here. However, no one is afraid to stick for what is necessary for their respective communities. But I think we have to stop looking at this I and me concept, and let's get broader and listen to what the speakers have to say. We can have a vigorous debate, but at the same time, we need to be respectful in this process. Number one, as I stated earlier, and stated publicly, privately, in any which way you want to hear, we will not, and I say we, not me, but we will not allow the disrespect to the chairman of this committee in this process. I don't want to go into that in detail, but please rest assured, this will not continue to occur. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Irving. Alderman Maldonado, and then followed by our speaker. Alderman, you are our absolutely last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a brief comment in reaction to what Mr. Adelson said earlier in relation to Mr. Lichman presentation, that he will be making a presentation about a map having been drawn by the Rules Committee and the coalition map without him driving around looking and mapping the precincts that we have throughout the city of Chicago that comprise the 50 wards. I mean, honestly, it amazes me to hear those comments from Mr. Adelson, because that is exactly what happened with the so-called coalition map. They have a map maker that never having driven to many of the neighborhoods that he was charged to draw maps for, he did. And so he drew maps for me without consulting me on 3 occasions, added neighborhoods that he had never in his life had set foot in those. And so, I mean, let's be honest about this process, okay? So I'm sure that Mr. Lichman is going to be bringing a legal perspective to his presentation. But in terms of the practical process that have taken place, I cannot say that the process undertaken by the so-called coalition map makers was fair at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Our next speaker will be Professor Alan Lichtman.
Thank you very
for
much.
being here with us.
Can you all hear me? Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm delighted to be able to address this distinguished body. I had previously addressed a committee of the state legislature. I'd like to take just a minute, tell you a little more about myself in ways that I think are relevant to my presentation today. In my more than 100 civil rights cases, I've worked with both plaintiffs and defendants. I have worked with, many major civil rights organizations, including the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, MALDEF, the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund, the NAACP, LDF, the NAACP itself, the Southern Poverty Law Center. Way back in the late 1980s, I was working for the Department of Justice in conjunction with MALDEF, and we established the first Latino Opportunity District in Los Angeles County, the biggest county in the country, bigger than many states. It was the landmark case for Latino voter opportunities. I was the expert in the landmark congressional redistricting case in Texas, LULAC versus Perry. And it was my testimony, credited by Justice Kennedy, that established a new Latino Opportunity District in Southwest Texas. Just last year, I was working with the Southern Poverty Law Center and on behalf of Latino plaintiffs, and we overturned part of a very pernicious anti-sanctuary city law as unconstitutional in federal district court. I also have extensive experience in litigation in Illinois. Back in the 1980s, I was the expert witness on behalf of the Bonilla Latino plaintiffs in the city of Chicago redistricting case. I was also an expert on behalf of establishing, in the King case, the first Latino Opportunity Congressional District in the city of Chicago. I have also worked on behalf of Democratic Caucus in the post-2000, 2010, and current redistricting litigation, successfully defending both congressional and state legislative plans. I was also the expert for the United States Commission on Civil Rights that discovered the egregious disparity racially in the rejection of ballots between African Americans and whites in the 2000 election in Florida, and that turned that election on behalf of George W. Bush. Among my most recent books is also a comprehensive study of voting rights in America, published by Harvard University Press. I will be talking not just about the law. I'm not a lawyer, although I've been on all these cases and will cite court cases. I'll also be talking about voting rights from the perspective of an historian and a social scientist, and someone who's been in these court cases and written extensively about the application of history and social science to the issues of voting rights. I will be talking about the state case. I will, in every instance, tie it back to what's going on in Chicago. We extensively examined the city of Chicago in the state case. In fact, the election that I primarily used to demonstrate that 40% plus Latino state legislative districts provide opportunities for Latino voters was a nonpartisan city of Chicago election. The mayoral election runoff between Emanuel and Garcia. And I showed when you applied that nonpartisan white versus Hispanic election to 5 city of Chicago Latino districts, all under 50% citizen voting age population, that the Latino candidate would have prevailed overwhelmingly in every one, even though the Latino candidate lost fairly handily in the city of Chicago. And most of the districts being challenged by Latino plaintiffs and the Republican plaintiffs were in fact in the city of Chicago, or at least partially in the city of Chicago. So let's go to my first slide, because I want to start by talking about the Voting Rights Act, something I've written about extensively and been involved in all these cases. So go to the next slide, please. So what is the purpose of the Voting Rights Act? I don't think we'll go through every bit of it. The purpose is really very simple, especially in Section 2. Unfortunately, Section 5, the preclearance section, was knocked down by the Supreme Court in 2013. But the basic point of Section 2 is to guard against any electoral law or rule set up by a jurisdiction that deprives a minority group of an equal opportunity with whites to elect candidates of their choice. Now, one component of that, as is indicated here, is the extent to which members of a protected class have been elected to office in the jurisdiction. However, it's explicit that no members of any group have a right to representation equal to their proportional representation in the population. However, in a landmark Supreme Court case where I was the expert for the Department of Justice on behalf of Latino plaintiffs in Florida, the landmark DeGrande case, Justice David Souter said, well, states are not required to establish proportional representation. A possible defense of a Section 2 lawsuit could be that the state has achieved not exact proportionality, but rough proportionality. You can go to the next slide. So what then is the measure for rough proportionality? And here, social scientists like myself and the courts agree. The measure cannot be total population because that includes people who are too young to vote and who are not citizens. And this particularly applies to Latinos who tend to have a young cohort and very substantial proportions of non-citizens. If you use total population, you may in fact be very deceptive in what the real voting strength of Latinos are in a district. Voting age population won't cut it either because that includes non-citizens. So the benchmark is citizen voting age population. In other words, imagine for a moment a jurisdiction totally free of discrimination that establishes an absolutely 100% fair system. Then every group would have representation equal to its voting strength, presuming equal turnout. I might get into the weeds on that. And that voting strength would be measured by citizen voting age population, those who are eligible to vote. We can turn to a city of Chicago case. Don't have to go to the state case immediately. Go to a city of Chicago case where I was the expert witness on behalf of the Bonilla Latino plaintiffs, and the Seventh Circuit, upholding the district court's decision, made it very clear. Our conclusion that the proper benchmark for measuring proportionality is citizen voting age population. They say that's consistent with the case law. We think that citizen voting age population is the basis for determining equality of voting power that best conforts with the policy of the statute. That's a specific Chicago case. We have a district court opinion, and we have a Seventh Circuit opinion. Go to the next slide. With all due respect to the speakers, and I greatly appreciate and listen very carefully to everything the speakers had to say, I understand where they're coming from. Clearly, for the city of Chicago, citizen voting age population was not rejected. It was accepted and avowed and affirmed by the court. So too, in the state case that we just litigated, citizen voting age population was not rejected, but rather was accepted as the benchmark for proportionality. And you can see here, they measured Latino representation against the 11.2% of citizen voting age population in Illinois. And they kind of credited the state for, rough proportionality, even though it fell short of the 11.2%. But they were crystal clear, just as the Barnett Court was crystal clear. The benchmark is citizen voting age population, which is consistent with the social science analysis of what groups would get representation in a perfectly fair system based upon their voting strength. We can go to the next slide. This is Jacob Grumbach, who was the expert witness for the Contreras plaintiffs, MALDEF, and he also made clear that his standard of comparison, this is the plaintiffs, this isn't the state, it's the plaintiffs, the Latino plaintiffs, and he's made clear that his standard of comparison is the citizen voting age population using the American Community Survey. So we have social science, we have the Chicago court, we have the state court, and we have the MALDEF expert witness and myself all on exactly the same page here. Let's move on. And we drilled very deeply into Chicago demography and Chicago elections because, as I said, most of the challenge districts were either in Chicago or partially in Chicago. So we examined in the state case the total population and the citizen voting age population in the city of Chicago because we were looking at representation and elections in the city of Chicago to cast insight into those legislative districts that were wholly or partially within the city of Chicago. And you can see here for Latinos, we're going to see in a moment, the sharp fall off between total population and citizen voting age population. And the truth is, you heard me, I've represented Latino plaintiffs in numerous cases. You would not want, as a Latino plaintiff, and we'll see that in a moment, a 50% total population to be your benchmark. Because if you had a malevolent leaders of a jurisdiction, they could establish a lot of Latino districts at 50.1% total population, but they may fall well short when you get to voting strength, citizen voting population. So we have 29.9% total, but if we move on to the proper benchmark, it's 20.7 because of age differences and citizenship differences. 20.7% translates to exact proportionality of 10.4 Latino opportunity districts. So as you see in a moment, because you don't have the kind of polarized voting in Chicago that you have in Mississippi and other southern places, Latinos can actually get elected beyond what we might regard as Latino opportunity districts. So keep that number 10.4 in mind, because we are now going to look at the Latino Caucus Plan and the Rules Committee Plan. So we can go to the next slide. All right. And these are in descending order the Hispanic CVAP for the two plans. And I drew a bright line at 11 because 11 slightly exceeds exact proportionality, much less rough proportionality.
But that one is got forwarded. But
Excuse me, somebody needs to mute their mic.
This one.
Someone mute. Can you mute everybody but the speaker?
Okay, can you hear me? Thank you. No problem. I drew a bright line at 11 because that's slightly in excess of proportionality, exact proportion, not even rough. You can see both plans have majority single race Hispanic CVAP districts, 11 in both plans. So, if you believe, and I don't, but if you believe, as the Latino plaintiffs did in state case, and I heard commentary on that from one of the prior speakers, that you need 50% plus districts to achieve equal opportunity for Hispanic select candidates of choice, then the two plans are absolutely equivalent. We can go down a little further and drill a little bit more. Both plans have districts with very substantial Hispanic pluralities, very close to 50%. Based on all of my election analyses in the Chicago area, including the nonpartisan election, these are also clearly Hispanic opportunities. So look, there's no such thing as a lock or a guarantee. That's not what the voting rights is all about. Voting rights is about providing equal opportunities, and certainly these go down to the 12 districts. Both plans provide equal opportunities, more than equal opportunities. Then we get to the more ambiguous, that's well in excess of exact proportionality, much less rough proportion. Then we get to the more ambiguous areas. Look at the 13th district. The Latino Caucus Plan has a slightly higher Hispanic CVAP, but it also has a very substantial African American population. Given what I know about turnout, African American turnout is substantially higher than Latino turnout. I'm not going to get into the reasons, this is an empirical fact. So it's by no means clear that that would be a Latino opportunity district. It's more likely an African American opportunity district. Whereas the Rules Committee plan has a lower Hispanic CVAP, but it has a minimal Black CVAP. So there's not going to be a competition between Black voters and Hispanic voters. So one could certainly argue that the Rules Committee plan has a 13th Hispanic Opportunity District. The Latino Caucus plan doesn't. Latino Caucus plan has a 14th, but that clearly is going to be an African American Opportunity District. It actually has a higher African American CVAP than Latino. The bottom line is, whichever plan this body in its wisdom adopts, and just for commentary, take it for its worth. I'm stepping outside of my expert role. Let's hope this doesn't go into protracted referendum litigation. I think the city's got more urgent problems, but the bottom line is, whichever plan is adopted, there's no voting rights case to be made against it, and certainly no voting rights case to be made against the Rules Committee plan, where you have at least 12 Hispanic Opportunity Districts and most likely 13. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, there's another issue here. Aside from the composition of the districts, to make a voting rights case, you've got to prove the so-called 3 jingles factors, the prerequisites for a Section 2 Voting Act violation set forth by the United States Supreme Court and reaffirmed by numerous courts, including in the Seventh Circuit. And I don't want to get through the whole thing here. I don't want to bore you. I just want to go to what's called prong 3 of jingles, that the majority or white bloc vote for a different candidate is sufficient to usually defeat the candidate preferred by minority voters. That is one of the areas, we go on to the next slide, where the Latino plaintiffs in the state case fell short, because we don't have that kind of white bloc voting here in the state of Illinois, including the nonpartisan election I looked at in Chicago, which, as I said, when you apply it to state legislative districts in the city, the Latino candidate would overwhelmingly win. And this was very clearly stated, a very clear finding by the court here. And I recall one of your speakers even talking about needing to prove the 3-part jingles factors. And what the court found was the plaintiffs failed to show that white or majority bloc voting defeats minority candidates of choice, the 3rd precondition for Section 2 liability under Thornburg versus Jingles. And they specifically go into the districts, Latino districts challenged by the Contreras, the MOLDEF, and the McConchie, the Republican plaintiff, specifically going into these districts and showing that prong 3 of Jingles simply does not apply. Go on to the next slide. And here I want to make the point that it wasn't just the courts in Chicago and in the state and social science analysis. It was the Latino plaintiffs themselves who regarded as their standard, not just for proportionality, but for assessing district opportunities. Their standard was not majority total population. It was not majority voting age population. It was majority Hispanic citizen voting age population. These are the Hispanic districts that are challenged. And every one of them, they wanted to push the Hispanic CVAP voting population above 50%, even if it was just 50.2. But every one of these districts that they challenged, they said didn't work for Latinos. I think the court found incorrectly, and I argued incorrectly, but leave that aside. This is the position taken by the Latino plaintiffs, including MOLDEF, that majority Hispanic total population was not sufficient, even at levels of 58 and close to 59%. Every one of the challenged districts had a Hispanic total population majority. All but one of them had an Hispanic voting age population majority, but they were still being challenged by the Latino plaintiffs because they argued that they fell below this threshold. The court rejected that argument, but that was their claim. The court rejected it for the very reason I just outlined, because you don't have this kind of polarized voting to satisfy prong for your jingles. In fact, what I found was more often than not, you had coalition voting between Hispanics and whites. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. One of the paradoxes of trying to push up these districts is it depends upon segregation. And I pointed out one of the paradoxes of the plaintiff's case was they had 13 experts, and a bunch of them were decrying segregation in the city of Chicago, saying we got to do everything in our power to get rid of segregation, but their plans depended upon segregation, depended upon packing Latinos into these districts at over 50%. When you have coalitions, you have much greater representational power. You're not dependent on segregation. You're not dependent upon heavily packed districts. And some of those districts were not just, very heavily Hispanic. They're 80 or more percent minority, very segregated districts. We can go to the next slide. I think this is our last slide. I'll finish up. This just shows, and these are all representatives in the state legislature from districts in Chicago, or at least partially in Chicago. We'd have many more representatives and senators elected from below 50% single race districts if we didn't eliminate all but those who represented House or Senate districts in or partially in Chicago. And you can see here in the Chicago area districts, we have 2 Latinos elected below 50 but above 40, but we also have 2 Latinos elected in below even 40% CVAP district. That doesn't happen unless you're able to build coalitions, and that's one of the very positive hallmarks of politics in Chicago and Illinois. Let's not forget, Chicago has all minority, citywide elected officials. Andrade is elected in a district that's almost 5 points below 40%. And we see the same pattern for Asians. 2 Asians are elected in Asian districts, only about 24%. So, to sum up, the purpose of the Voting Rights Act is to prevent systems that deny minorities equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. One defense is rough proportionality. Social science, the courts, the Latino plaintiffs themselves firmly established, not rejected, that citizen voting age population is the appropriate measure. When it comes to citizen voting age population, both plans achieve Latino opportunity districts above even exact proportionality, and arguably the Rules Committee plan provides one more district. Can we go back to the very last slide? I want to make one more point about that in my summary. The very last slide, the one with the representatives on it. Yeah. If you look at, I won't even try to pronounce her name, Christina Pacion Zayas' district, that's almost identical to the 13th district in the Rules Committee plan for aldermanic districts in Chicago. Both have about a 42% Latino citizen voting age population, and both, although it's not shown here, but both have a very low Black citizen voting age population. So, again, both plans meet the Voting Rights Act. Arguably, the Rules Committee plan may have one additional district, and you don't have the kind of polarized voting in the city of Chicago or state of Illinois. that would satisfy Jingles prong 3. And in fact, you can't measure voting opportunities for minority voters just by heavily packed minority districts, and that's not even desirable for minorities. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Professor. Alderman Irvin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just had a quick question for the professor.
Sure.
And, thank you for your analysis, and I think this is the historical context that you bring to this conversation and your work throughout the years. In part of the plan that was sold towards 15 and 17 under the Latino plan, which had a 48 and 37% amount of African Americans on the CVAP basis. Might one argue that those individuals are being cracked from their traditional communities and being placed in another community to necessarily dilute the voting strength of them? Because if you put them together, because they are neighboring, they on their face would have their own ward.
It's a very good question. And unfortunately, of course, I can't comment about the process for drawing the map or any individual communities. I'm only looking at the numbers. And of course, if you wanted to consolidate those two districts, you could create, obviously, a more substantial African-American district. I presume, as I said, I haven't looked at any map making, but I take you at your word. I'm sure you're right. But that poses an interesting question, and I'm not going to answer it for you because you guys make the political decisions. But perhaps you have here two African-American opportunity districts. If you consolidate, you might have one that's more secure, but you lose the other. So the trade-off is you keep two districts where it's less certain than one, but you have a chance for two, or do you secure the one? I'm not going to answer that for you, but that's what's posed here.
No, understandable. And my second question is, to the extent that you are, your analysis states that based on CVAP, that the 11 would be an optimal number, or at least a number that would be acceptable in the court. However, here the desire is to be potentially at 15. Does anyone speak to what one may consider to be an overreach on the number of districts that one legally is entitled to in that vein?
Very good question. And let me say, first of all, that to an extent, redistricting is a zero-sum game. You know, what one gains often another loses. And one of your aldermen very eloquently spoke to that. Nobody gets exactly what they want. You know, I've been involved in this for, I'm 74, almost 75, been involved in this for over 40 years. And, you know, everybody has their desires, but nobody gets it absolutely perfectly. In terms of 15 wards, the measure of CVAP, remember, the social science, the courts, the Latino plaintiffs all agree the measure is CVAP, not total pop. And as I said, it would not be desirable for Latinos to establish total pop as their benchmark. The Latino caucus plan doesn't come close to 15 wards. I would say it's got 12, which is above proportionality, but it's not 15.
So you're the position of total population, just in this case via the law and via what is generally accepted throughout this country, is just not the case here. So my final question.
That's right,
is,
and what's not accepted in Chicago, in the Barnett case, let's not forget that.
Okay, and we talk about total population, and it's talked about in a manner for reapportionment, which is a method that is done for the U.S. House of Representatives. Can you kind of dive into the differences between how the federally it's done versus how it's done either at the state or local level?
An excellent question. First, let me say the use of total population for apportionment is totally separate and apart. It's nothing to do with the use of population measures for the total population, or CVAP for assessing minority opportunities and for assessing liability and or satisfaction under the Voting Rights Act. The apportionment based on total population does not break it down at all into groups, just looks at total population as a whole, and that simply defines the requirement for joint districts. In the federal case, it's a little bit different. You've got to literally come as close as you can, with a deviation of 1 or 2. With state or local redistricting, the rule of thumb is about a 10%. That is, you can go 5% one side, 5% the other side. That's the prerequisite. You start with that. But once you've done that, you then got to do a very separate and distinct voting rights analysis that is not determinative by the deviations.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate your insight that you've brought to this and brought to us. And again, thank you, Madam Chair, for the questions. I may come back with something else, but that's where I'm at right now. Thank you, ma'am.
Alderman Espada, followed by Alderman Villegas.
Thank you very much. First, as a point of information, there isn't a Latino caucus map, so I get confused when we make that reference. There is, Mr. Lichtman, for your reference, a coalition map that had input from a majority of the city council that is sponsored by some members of the Latino caucus, some folks who are not members of the Latino caucus, so that you're aware if you give further presentations, it's the coalition map.
Fair enough. I'm just looking at the numbers. I'm not getting into the politics.
But we use words and words count. So I wanted to be clear.
Fair enough. If I can't say who's accurate and who isn't, but I hear you.
That's all right. I'm sorry that we couldn't get. So I wanted to talk about CVAP because in this committee months ago, we were informed that CVAP was not the measure that we were using to determine maps for our ward maps. But I did want to ask you, because we have so many Chicagoans under 18, so many undocumented Chicagoans, as we talk to them about the map making process, as I hope many of them are tuning into this, how would you talk to undocumented and Chicagoans under 18 on how they are represented and counted in our ward maps?
Well, they're still represented in your ward maps. In other words, if in fact, because you're using a measure that doesn't accurately measure Latino voting strength, and you get in those wards candidates who are not the candidates of choice of Latinos, but are the candidates of choice, say, of those who might be antithetical to the interests of Latinos, that's not a desirable thing. As I said, if you had a benevolent ruling body, they could kind of shut out Latinos by using this total population. So I'd say to them, by drawing wards that provide opportunities for Latinos to elect candidates of their choice, you are in fact representing the interests of all Latinos, whether citizens, whether young people, whether undocumented, and you don't want to set up a situation where you are electing those who are not the candidates of choice.
And Mr. Lichtman, you talked about the strength of coalition, and it's true. Building coalitions are important. Would you say also that even if you can't vote, say our undocumented residents, our youth residents, that they do have a strength in that process, that they can influence the choices being made by their communities?
Absolutely. They can certainly petition their representatives. You know, they can demonstrate, they can write, they can speak. But as I said, if you're setting up a system that shuts out the candidates of choice of Latinos, you're not helping those folks.
This is where I'm glad that we're talking about this. To be clear, particularly to our undocumented and young residents who are watching, even if you are not a citizen or of voting age, your presence in your community counts. I would hate for you to be taking away from this meeting that you count any less than your neighbors who have a vote in the city of Chicago. Your presence determines who your community is and how your community votes. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. And that's why you want to set up a plan that provides for a fair representation of Hispanic voting strength so you get representatives who can speak to everyone in the community.
Alderman Villegas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lichtman, for the presentation.
Certainly.
I just wanted to make sure I heard something correctly. You said that both plans, as presented, meet the Voting Rights Act. Was that correct?
That's correct. Both plans, based upon the CVAP benchmark, achieve proportionality. And I believe, look, I'm not a lawyer, so this is just my opinion, but it's an educated opinion, but it has no legal standing. Keep that in mind. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge.
No, Mr. Lichtman, I appreciate that. And in the presentation, you did state early on that you were not an attorney, but, quote, you were an expert in Voting Rights Act. And so I just wanted to make sure that I heard you correctly.
You did.
So that way, okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
Thank you.
But by the way, let me clarify that. I only looked at Latinos because that was, you know, the subject of controversy that I was asked to comment on. I can't say whether either plan does or does not satisfy the Voting Rights Act with respect to other protected groups, just because I didn't look at it.
Thank you, Professor. Our next speaker is going to be Mike Casper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As is usually the case when I'm in with Dr. Lichtman, I don't have anything to add to his presentation.
Thank you. So if there are no further questions before the body, that will conclude our presentation today. Oh, Alderman Smith.
Sorry, I thought my question.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just have one question, which is, what is the current status of the state voting rights case that you talked about?
This is Mike Casper. I will take that question. The case, the three-judge panel of the Federal District Court issued its decision a few weeks ago. And as of today, there's been no further action.
And how long does anyone have? What would be the appeals mechanism from a three-judge panel?
I am uncertain as to what the deadline is. I haven't calculated that yet.
But to where do you take an appeal?
Because the appeal under there's a statute that provides that statewide redistricting cases are heard by a three-judge panel of the federal court rather than by a single judge, and those cases are appealed directly to the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah. So as of yet, no one has filed an appeal.
Correct.
Okay, that's just what I want to know. And the appeal would be to the U.S. Supreme Court. All right. Thank you very much. That was my only question, Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Irvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to follow up on a statement that Mr. Lichtman made as it stated to his analysis or lack of analysis as it pertains to the African American community. But what you are stating is that the map that the committee has presented and the map that the other group has presented meet the requirements for Latinos, but not for African Americans. Is that a fair statement?
Not exactly. Close. Okay. I only looked at Latinos, so both
right. So
plans
you really don't have
provide.
opinion.
I just haven't looked at African Americans. I'm not saying the plan doesn't or does. I just
okay. So
no
we have
opinion
not.
about it.
So we could go through this process and find that the map that the Latino caucus created, or the group, whatever they're calling themselves this week, does not meet the need or the for the African American community, and the specific point that was brought out between wards 15 and 17 may in fact be a point of contention in their map as it's been stated.
That's correct. I have not, it's possible. I can't say one way or the other.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Is that all you have? Otherwise, if you're ready to adjourn,
Wait,
you got-
Alderman Harrison will be our last speaker.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm
Thank
sorry, Leslie.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right.
Mr. Casper, you are in fact an attorney, are you not?
I am. Last time I checked.
Well, they always tell me don't ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Because there was a point made about our expert not being a lawyer, and you are in fact a lawyer, and you actually argued the case. So could you please tell us a little bit about this most recent case? What were the facts? What were the allegations, and what were the findings of the court?
Okay, very briefly, I'll be happy to. There were three. The state, as you know, enacted a redistricting plan for the state legislature as was required by the Constitution. Mr. Tristan, in his comments, talked about the use of the ACS data. The state used the ACS data, which is a survey. It covers the period of 2015 to 2019, a 5-year period, to allocate people to the districts because the final census numbers were not available. Once the final census numbers were available, the state amended the plan or created a new plan using the census numbers. And to clarify just very briefly, the use in allocating people to districts, both plans, the coalition map and the rules committee plan, both use total population to allocate people. So we took the total population of the city divided by 50 and came up with a number of 54,928. And that was the target population. That's based on total population, which is a very different subject from compliance with the Voting Rights Act, which, as Dr. Lichtman testified, is based upon citizen voting population. So there were 3 cases. At the end of the day, there were 3 cases filed. One was by the Republican leaders of the legislature that challenged a number of districts. For purposes of our discussion, it challenged a number of Latino districts in and around the city of Chicago, both on the north and the south side. There were some citizens who brought a complaint also challenging some of the same districts and some different districts, Latino districts. Those were citizens who were represented by the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. And they obviously have years and decades of experience doing these cases. And so they were very well represented in that case. And the third case was brought by the East St. Louis branch of the NAACP. And that case challenged one African-American district down in Southern Illinois. So those cases, they weren't technically consolidated, but they were tried as one. We went through some extensive discovery, then had a hearing, and the result was that the court found for the state defending the plan and upheld the plan in every regard in all 3 cases.
And the plan was based on population, not on Democrat or Republican?
Yeah, the plan was divided based on population, total population, same as both of the city proposals, both of the current proposals that we're talking about. The people were allocated to districts based upon total population.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And no aldermen having had their hands up, Alderman Irvin renews his motion to adjourn, having no business before us. The committee's adjourned.